right. So I am super pumped today, Business Freedom Podcast listeners, to have Chris Waters with us, who's out of Austin, Texas. And he's going to share his story here in a minute. As you guys know, the Business Freedom Podcast exists to help top producing real estate agents and team leaders just have an easier journey. And if I can bring the good, the bad, the ugly of our guests to bear here on the show, it's going to make your journey to business ownership that much easier. So, Chris, how are you, brother?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me on, Lars.
Yeah. So, kind of just start off. Give us a little bit of your background before I get into the questions. The questions are going to be fast and furious, but just give us a little bit of background. How'd you get into real estate? Maybe kind of tee up the entry into real estate for us.
Yep. So about 12 years ago, I graduated college, had a lawn mowing business to pay my way through college. One of my customers, actually, he had a small little team at Keller Williams, convinced me to come on board as a buyer's agent. At that time, I was going on job interviews with like Goldman Sachs and all these different financial firms. I got a degree in finance. And as I was going on these interviews, I kind of realized like I didn't really see myself behind a desk working for somebody. So I gave it a shot. I joined this team at KW as a buyer's specialist for 3 months. And I was 21, going on 22 at the time, and had very little humility. And, they're trying to keep me super laser focused and telling me, which dominoes to knock down next. And, all the meanwhile, I'm going and taking all these classes, reading books, just diving headfirst in. And I'm learning about how important it is to build listing inventory and listings, leads, leverage, etc. And so after 3 months of working internet leads and open houses, I sold quite a few homes, like I think 4 or 5 closings in my first 90 days, which I think was pretty decent, and felt pretty good about it. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to take the next step and go get listings. And the team leader was like, hey, hold on. You're 3 to 4 months in. There's kind of this trajectory you should kind of take as an agent, and it's better to start as a buyer's agent. And, contracts are more tailored to you, keep you out of trouble, and then, hit one domino after another. So I didn't have enough humility at the time, was not coachable. One weekend, started prospecting expireds, picked up a listing, and I turned it in on a Monday to him, and I quit. And I essentially got out of real estate completely. I had a customer refer me to like another boutique broker who I joined. And so this is like beginning of 2007. And in Texas, the oil and gas industry was huge. And so this broker actually said, hey, Chris, you're 21 years old. You should really, just kind of open your horizons to a lot of different things. And the interesting thing about the oil and gas industry as a landman, you have to basically learn the title business, kind of like what title companies do. And so he's like, hey, the market's hot right now. Take advantage of the financial upside. You get to learn a different side of the business. So I did that for about two years and made a lot of money. And in 2009, took all my savings, money from selling my lawn business, everything, and started a bar and restaurant. And it was first 6 months were really good. And then in about June of 2009, if you recall, that's when the Dow Jones dropped and hit 5,000. And our niche was going after corporate type events for the venue. And in June, we started getting one cancellation after another by companies. Their budgets had dried up. They couldn't spend the money to do these events. And so business dropped 30% in June, 50% in July, another 60% in August. And I literally burned through all my cash, all my savings. And I ended up sleeping on at that time, my girlfriend's couch, literally a red IKEA couch that was held up by phone books. And funny story, I actually ended up marrying this girl. And we now have a 18-month-old together. When the bar and restaurant kind of fell apart, I knew I always loved real estate, just specifically because you got to work on so many different things. Like no day was the same. You get to learn lead generation, operations, training, all that kind of stuff. And so, I'm sleeping on her couch, and I just started basically becoming a prospecting machine, going back to my roots from the first 3 to 4 months I was an agent, and I was calling expireds and withdrawals. I went to ActiveRain.com at the time, had these things called Rain Camp. and Ben Kinney was teaching one, and he talked about Boomtown. And this is like beginning of 2010. And I'm massively in debt and like had just enough money to put a Boomtown system on a credit card. Started generating a crap ton of leads through Boomtown. I'm working expired withdrawals. And I had kept my license active, although I wasn't actively working. And I was able to become a broker. And I'd only sold like 5 or 6 houses. And so, I started building a team. I started recruiting agents to work those buy-side leads. I kept building up listing side inventory. So that's kind of how things kind of came about the first 4 to 5 years.
Awesome. And one thing I want to get clear, and this is one thing we were chatting before we got on here, is sharing the struggles in your journey. So as we're talking here, don't be afraid to kind of just highlight the low points. And so I'll ask you, so I can get your commitment up front, are you prepared to share the good, the bad, and the ugly about your business journey?
No doubt, man, for sure. I mean,
raise your right hand. All right. So
you're going to hear it.
I'm glad we got that out of the way. Hey, I want to start with what's your favorite quote? I know when I was growing up in the business, it was the Napoleon Hill, what man can conceive and believe he can achieve. What's a quote that stands out in your mind, and how do you apply it on a daily basis?
So Ralph Waldo Emerson, you become what you think about all day long. So I think as you're scaling the team model, like you're going to fall on your face 1,000 times. And if you can stay focused on the big vision, the big picture, and where you want to go, it's going to help you understand like this moment in time is just a very short snapshot of what's going on in your life. And it's not going to be what the rest of your life is going to continue looking like. So I love that quote. There's a really old, like black and white YouTube video of Ralph Waldo Emerson, like kind of giving this whole story about the power of your conscious and subconscious mind. A great book I love is The Ant and the Elephant. And it's a great like book to help you understand like how your conscious mind, if you just constantly are telling yourself, like, this is where I want to go, it eventually like seeps into your subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind like will, this is like when you wake up in the morning and you have a light bulb moment and you're like, I've got it figured out. Well, that's your like subconscious mind helping you come up with a solution.
Yeah.
So that is a super inspiring message for me, because it helps me remember like anytime I'm going through a struggle.
Yeah.
Remember, it's just a small little snippet of my life, not the whole, 60, 70 years ahead of me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really, really powerful. And I was taking notes here on the couple mentions there. Let's get into our first topic. I want to talk about failure. And this is one thing, especially, I don't know, maybe in other industries, but in real estate, it doesn't seem like there are a lot of guys out there that are leading with, failure. And if you guys haven't picked up this book, I will tell you, The $1 Million Real Estate Team by this guy called Chris Waters. Out of the gate, you talk about how challenging this is going to be. So let's talk about the failure to start. For business builders, this is not the easy button. This is not like, man, I'm just going to flip on the switch to build a team. Everyone's going to be attracted to me. The systems are going to run flawlessly. It's going to be super profitable. Everyone's going to be accountable and be there early like me. And so somewhere in this journey of building a business, there lies failure. So Chris, tell me about your failures early on in building the real estate team. I know you had the oil gas stuff, but specifically as it relates to the real estate team, start with the events leading up to it. If it was some missteps, some spending, so kind of get us into that mode of your failures.
I can have diarrhea of the mouth because I have so many. So, very first thing, like I talked about getting Boomtown. So I went out and became a recruiting ninja for like 3 months to get agents on board to start working leads. And I hadn't closed that many deals. I still am like mind blown that I was able to get my broker's license. And so my like thought process at that time was I needed to go out and recruit agents that had been in the industry for a while. and that had done deals and were experienced. And like basically all they were lacking was like technology and leads. And so I had this really cool tool at the time in 2010, Boomtown. And so that was my big value proposition. I was like, hey, I'm going to give you leads. You have this great technology system and you can just, do your thing. And so I recruited 15 agents over the course of 3 months to come on, and I'm generating, like 5, 6, 7, 800 leads, and I'm passing them out. And in a 12-month time, our team between the summer of 2010 and 2011 closed like roughly like 75 deals or so. And over half of those was for me. So I had 15 agents over the course of 12 months close less than 35 transactions. I closed like about 40 deals. And I was like, what's going on? And so I had one guy, and here's the other interesting thing. So out of those 15, I had one guy that closed like 30 of them. So
and in your head you were doing the math, 15 times 30 deals each, like surely we're going to do 400 sides.
Oh, piece of cake. Yeah. So I went to that one guy, his name's Brad, and he's coincidentally the co-author of the book with me. And I went to Brad and I said, look, I'm going to burn this ship down. I'm going to let everybody go, and it's just going to be you and I. I'm going to bring on an assistant to help me on the listing side. I'm going to build up the listing inventory. What do you think about coming on board as a buyer agent team leader, managing, recruiting, the selection process, training, leading, and motivating? I'll build up the listing side. And, he was like, yeah, I'm game. So in a nutshell, we burned it all. I burned it all down, let everybody go, and started all over, and started focusing on finding newer agents that didn't know a whole lot. Like they'd been in the business less than 2 years.
I'm going to interrupt you there. I want to hear, so what was the big lesson from that fast and furious, not even a failure, but what was the big lesson from that time?
Yeah. So I think the lesson and the takeaway is just because somebody says they have 20 years in the business doesn't mean they're going to be an expert at managing their leads, follow-up, conversion, and they're going to be really great at, converting people. Your duration of time as a licensed agent is not an indicator of how successful you are as a salesperson. And so that was the big aha.
Yeah. Awesome. Really, really good. All right. So what's, so now you sort of, this is the real birth of your team where you've got, I'm looking at the book, you've got Brad.
Yep.
And you have an assistant. So you've got some leverage with an admin.
I had a VA at the time. Yep.
Yeah. What are the couple things that you guys are focused on to build a business from there?
Yep. So I had one VA helping like generate leads through Craigslist, doing like the listing management, like marketing of each individual listing. We were outsourcing things like courier, photographer to try to, be more leveraged. And then Brad was focused 100% on recruiting and training, and pretty much gave up his production. And, another key piece we talk about in the book is the brand ambassador program. So I went out and built this brand ambassador program of people where I was basically a brand ambassador for them pushing their business. The NAR put out some study that like, as a result of the home sale, there's like north of $80,000 that the economy gets impacted by when a sale happens. So realtors are definitely the hinge to make a lot of that happen. And so we have a lot of influence to be able to refer people for all kinds of different things. So I built up the brand ambassador program to zero-based my marketing. With the listing revenue I started having coming in, I used that to give Brad a small salary. He got a override on the buyer agent team. And then we started building like a really refined training program for agents. And so that was like a big kind of tipping point to start getting the buyer agent team built correctly, was having like a very refined ramp up process, because you've got to teach agents a little bit about the technical side. You have to teach them about lead management. You have to teach them about what to say on the phone, objection handling. You got to teach them about how to actually get in front of a buyer, present value, get them converted into buyer's rep. And then you've got to be able to set good expectations from a market expertise perspective to get them to the closing table. Mm-hmm. So that was a whole process we laid out in this kind of ramp up guide for new agents. And that's when things started to click on the buy side, and we started having success, and agents started having some upward trajectory, and we didn't have quite the high turnover.
Yeah. And so how long did that fade? Like, how long were you in? So you were focused on listings at that time, probably hired an admin or two over that time.
Yep.
Brad was focused on building the buyer agent team, recruiting and training.
Yep. So yeah, my first key hires were, so I had the VA at the very beginning. First in-house was an executive assistant, and she wore a lot of hats. She was like office manager, listing manager, closing coordinator, like my personal assistant, doing it all. And then as listing inventory grew, transaction volume, all that increased. We hired another in-house person to do more listing side management. So we kind of separated the roles. So like my EA became EA plus like closing coordinator. And then I had a listing manager doing all the listing management stuff.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So at what point did you, and I want to get to what the business looks like today. What were your major roles and responsibilities so this is 2012, 13, 14, and then took you about 3-4 years to kind of build out the infrastructure. Tell me what were the things you were worried about every day? Where did you put your effort, and how did it change from one thing? You're probably just fast and furious on listing lead gen and taking listings. And then you figured that out, systemized it, stepped into the next thing. What were those other things, and how lopsided was work-life balance when you were in it?
Yeah. I mean, look, I didn't have kids at the time, and I have massive respect for anybody that has kids, because I don't know how I could have done it. Cause like I was waking up, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd be on appointments until 9 o'clock at night, and, didn't have to go back and do stuff on the computer until like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And so that went on for like, from 2010 until basically 2013, summer of 2013, like my face was to the grindstone. It was not easy by any means. So I was focused on getting listings. And then I eventually at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, I hired an inside sales agent. So he basically started doing the outbound prospecting for me, calling expireds, withdrawals, for sale by owners, things like that, which then helped me start taking a lot more listings. I got up to doing like 15, 20, 25 listings taken per month by myself. And then in 2013 is when I hired my first listing agent and stopped going on listings. Summer of 2013. I kind of to be honest, I hit a brick wall. Like I was so burnt out on listings. Like if I saw the inside of another closet, I was going to shoot myself.
Yeah.
Because like everybody wants to talk about how great and big their closets are. And they're, I hit a wall. And so it kind of forced me to get a listing agent. And so 2013, I had a listing agent, inside salesperson, buyer agent, team leader. We had about 8-9 buyer agents. And then we also had transaction coordinator and kind of like office manager / EA and also a buy-side transaction coordinator. Yeah. So that's basically what the team looked like. It was roughly like 15, 16 people.
Yeah.
2013, we did like 325 or so closings with that team. So.
Yep. And then I want to cover this quote because, I'm going to sound like an old guy, and I'm only 44, but it does seem like the society we live in today is just looking for instant gratification on everything. And I get it. My kids even see it in me. I have a 7-year-old and 10-year-old where if I want something, it's like there sometimes the same day. We have an Amazon, distribution center in Charlotte, and there's like, so I get it. But this quote, and it's unknown, and I'm sure you've heard it, is entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life like most people won't, so that you can spend the rest of your life like most people can't. Yeah. And I just think it is underestimated the level of, because I had kids at the time I went through. Yours and my journey are very, very similar. I started Boomtown, when it was just me. I did the build the buy side, step out, go to the listing side, step out. And I had a child at the time, and to sort of, say goodnight to them at 10.
Yeah.
go work for 3 or 4 hours, a few nights a week. And that was pretty regular for about 2.5 years or so.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, man, mad respect.
yeah, so there are more proven paths now. I mean, just getting the book and reading the book, you can see the pitfalls and the potholes and all of that. When you made that shift from production to more business ownership, tell me about one lesson or one thing that our listeners can really sink their teeth into around, like, man, I can't see letting go of 30 deals a year. Who knows if 300 deals a year is in my future? There's a fear mentality around, of course I need to be the one to show houses, or, what lesson or words of advice would you give someone that's looking to make this transition?
Tony Robbins says most people won't make a change until there's like an immense amount of pain. And so I would tell anybody, like, either you need to just get over it, get over these limiting beliefs and take the leap of faith, maybe put enough money in the bank for like 6 months so that you stop producing and you start going and recruiting and building a team. So that would be one like conservative way to go about doing it. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a place where you're going to have to just incur massive pain. Like, for example, like missing your kids' soccer games and football games and, missing out on a big piece of their life because you're kind of like capped in everything as a single agent or a small team. And, you have no work-life balance. So the team model will help you, kind of put life back in balance once you get into that business ownership position. So that's something we reference in the book quite frequently, is like the goal of the book is like to try to help people scale the team model. And in the back of it says, we want to help you go from captain everything to an ownership mentality. Yeah. And so, again, conservative strategy, put some money in the bank and just jump. And, it's like when you're a kid, and you don't want to jump in the cold water, but you jump in and then it feels good once you're in there, Yeah. So anyways.
And I mean, it's a really good point. And when you look at the future of real estate and some of the competitive pressures, the big money coming into our industry, and man, I'm afraid for the conventional real estate agent 3 to 5 years from now.
Big time.
I firmly believe if you're not building a team and running it yourself, you're going to be working for someone else, or you're going to be a discount agent where someone else is deciding how much you get paid.
Right. So the team model helps kick in like economies of scale to leverage a lot of different lead generation strategies. And so like we had a guy join our team here in Austin, and he was spending $1,000 a month on Zillow, and he asked if we could take on that burden. And I said, sure, we'll take it on. So like just one of the ahas we've had with Zillow is, first off, failed massively at Zillow, like went big, went small, and like have screwed it up a million different ways. But like to make Zillow work, you've got to have a crap ton of reviews, like hundreds of reviews, hundreds of past sales. And when you go into a zip code, you've got to be buying like a very large share of voice, because you got to think about it like a billboard. And people are going back to the website multiple times. They need to see your face multiple times like a billboard to create top of mind awareness and build kind of that expertise, and make people believe you're the go-to person. And so if you're an individual agent, you're not going to have hundreds of past sales, hundreds of reviews. You're just not going to have it. You need to leverage a team. And so if you decide to build a team, like obviously those are the benefits you're going to have, is by putting all these little campfires together, you've got really big ones, and it helps create economies of scale and a win-win for everybody. Yeah. Agents will be able to do more deals. Their trajectory is much better because they get a lot more experience in a shorter period of time. They've got a lot of more people around them to support them and mentor them. It's super hard as a single agent. Like there's so much ambiguity. You feel like a number at these big brokerages. There's lots of brokerages that offer a lot of great classes, but to be honest, like there's not a lot of brokerages out there that have like a really well-designed coaching program like yours, where it's like you have this really clear trajectory of what you need to do and when. It's always like, take this class, take that class, take this one. And it's like, it's all just in disarray and very much a cluster.
Yeah.
So anyways, no, I agree with you 100%. And just back to the coaching thing. I don't want to like sit here and convince people to hire you, but I know that's not why you're interviewing me.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, one of my biggest lessons in life, I think over the last 10 to 12 years has been like, either you're going to have to get in that place, like I mentioned, where you're in so much pain, then you're willing to do whatever it takes to change. And usually what happens as a result of all that pain is you become very humble and you have a lot of humility, and that's when you become coachable. So, it gets, to be honest, like just human psychology, it gets hard to stay humble as you're having upward trajectory and success. So I think, anything you can do to keep yourself humbled. There's lots of people that say you're the average of like the 3 or 5 people you spend the most time with. And so like you constantly need to be like up in the bar and hanging out with people that are doing even bigger and better things than you, where you're like the little man in the room. So you always feel like you got to push, learn, and be coachable. Yeah. So like when I was 22, was not humble at all, failed massively. And when I got involved in coaching in 2011, and that was a total freaking game changer for me, because it helped me like not have to go reinvent the wheel. I was watching Shark Tank one time, and Damon John said, pioneers get slaughtered and settlers prosper. Yeah. I was like, yeah, man, that is a really good point. It's like every time you try to go do some pioneering, it's like, man, you get crushed. It's like if you're an entrepreneur, you got to go out there and raise like $10 to $50 million these days to go be a pioneer. So like if you don't want to go raise $10 to $50 million, you want to build a real estate business, build a team. You can do that without raising $10 to $50 million. But to do that, you've got to get a coach. That way you're not like wasting money trying to like figure out what works. And time value of money. You end up, that first year, I wasted an entire year hiring all these super experienced agents. And if I had a coach who'd been telling me, dude, no, stay away from those guys, like find new agents that are hungry, ambitious, totally committed, and collaborate with them together to help build your team. So one of my biggest, I think, decisions that helped me drastically grow was getting involved in coaching.
Yeah. And this is the coaching business, and this is not a coaching commercial. It's a tough business because there are agents out there selling 30 homes that are conventionally successful in what they do. And there's just so much skepticism and cynicism around, building an actual business. And so I definitely hear what you're saying there. And it's back to the Tony Robbins, you sort of said, mentioned Tony Robbins, one of the things he says is, business is 80% psychology and 20% strategy. Really when it comes down to it, this path is known at this point. The only thing that's going to hold you back from selling 30 homes or 300, you doing 30 and working 60 to 70 hours a week, or you leading a team that sells 300 where you're making triple the amount of money and you've got 8 to 10 weeks of vacation. It's just mindset and psychology. Yeah. So let me ask you a few sort of rapid fire questions here. What's the best advice you've ever received about business?
Focus on the who.
Tell me more.
So, I mean, ultimately, when you get to that place where you're in more the leadership role and you're running the business, you're not going on listing appointments, your success and failure is determined by the people around you. So there's a great book out there I read called The Rare Find by George Anders. Have you read that?
Nope.
So the book, The Rare Find, this guy like dedicated like 30 years of his life to like going into all these different industries, like Navy SEALs, Teachers for America, like medical industry, like every industry you can imagine. And he was trying to find what were the underlying characteristics of people that were massively successful. And kind of in a nutshell, the thesis of the book is that you don't actually see how well somebody's going to do in your company until they're actually in that role. And you see them in the first kind of 30 to 60 days. So it's through taking action, that person taking action, where you actually get to see their like innate internal characteristics as a human being. And in the book, it goes on to further state, like when you look at Navy SEALs and all these different types of places, Like the things that make these people really successful isn't that they're smarter. It isn't, that maybe they're better, physically conditioned or whatever. It's that they are just crazy driven. They're super focused. They're committed. They're coachable, and they're super resilient. Like, and those underlying characteristics, if you can have those, you will find success in anything you do. So as a business owner or a leader, your job is to assemble a team of people that have those underlying characteristics. So what ends up happening is when you become kind of in the business ownership role, your job is to assemble a team of the who. Find the right who with those underlying characteristics, and the rest will take care of itself. Yeah. The best salespeople don't need managers. They are committed, resilient, super focused, humble, coachable. They're going to do what it takes to succeed. They're going to be very resourceful. They're going to find a way to succeed on your team, even if you don't even have it all figured out as a team leader. Yeah. So that's the number one thing, focus on the who.
Yeah. Our last hire came out of timeshare sales over the phone. He started with Hilton making 60 grand. He made 270 in last year.
Wow.
And he's going to have his third month of production with us. He'll have 1.5 million. He did 1 million in February. He'll close 1.5 million. And we provide a pretty solid environment for him to sort of stick in his lane.
Yeah.
But I love it. Tell me what's one of your personal habits that you believe contributes to your success?
I'm a very consistent person. So I don't, from a business perspective, I test a lot of different things, but I test it for, 6 months to a year. I'm not fly by night testing this today, some different tomorrow. Like, I will stay committed and consistent to anything. And that really holds true for a lot of things in life. Like, working out, for example. Like, I always will go work out in the mornings. It's just a very consistent thing. I don't go through these fads. So I think that's like, one core thing about me is I'm just I'm very consistent and committed. And I understand like the idea of embracing the challenge when you're on that upward curve of testing something new. But I'm also not attached to the outcome. So like if 6 to 12 months, like something sucks, yeah, maybe I wasted a lot of money and time, but you got to let it go. So, I don't know, those are probably that's my answer for you.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. And in Real Estate B School, we kind of say, it's going deep and not wide. We have members that are eclipsing 300 sides 3 years in, up from 60 sides, and they have two paid lead sources in their database. And it's just the structure, the accountability, the cadence, the practice, the scripting, it's just everyone wants to make it more complicated than it is. And it's just not. Like, it's not a complicated business.
That actually brings up a really good point. Like, that was kind of like an aha for me, like through coaching, is like, I wanted to like perfect things and like probably push it too far. And there's definitely like this diminishing return where like your time is not going to, like, you could spend, years focused on inside sales, for example, and trying to build out an inside sales department. And it's like, what's the one thing that makes all that unnecessary? Get really good at finding an inside sales team leader to go build your inside sales team. And you as a business owner, don't get wrapped up in all the details. Just focus on finding the who that's going to be super passionate about that.
Yeah.
So anyways.
That's awesome. All right. Tell me one app or internet resource like Evernote, Audible that you think that you're in love with, that you think our listeners would think is cool as well.
Man, great question. Let me pull up my iPhone here. So I've got a few. One is like, there's an app in Austin called Favor to order food. So it helps me like leverage my time with food to like order, food. That's a stupid one. I want to give guys something like good.
Well, no, I'll piggyback on that. So we use a company called Factor 75. It's a nationwide company that does really healthy meals, and we have it delivered once a week. and literally I can go downstairs and in a minute I can have an awesome meal made. So I think that's a good one. It's the
Well,
concept of leverage, and like you don't really need to cook your food. You don't need to clean your house,
yep.
mow your lawn. You need to do something more
I'll
productive.
I'll give you. I'm going to give you one that's like more, I think, good for like probably more applicable to this podcast. Is I've like over the years read books, and like you hear about all these people and their morning rituals, like Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins and all these people. Like Tim Ferriss did a big deal on like people's morning rituals, and he said like, you know, crazy, super successful people, like 80 or 90% of them, part of their morning ritual is meditation.
Mm.
And I'm not like a crazy religious spiritual type person, and and I'm still trying to figure all this out regarding meditation and how that parlays with spirituality, religion, whatever. But you know, as a business owner or somebody that's like a hard charger, the flip side of that hard charging, like constantly, like your mind is always going, is like it can also be very, you know, anxious as a person, you know, and sometimes it's, you know, it's hard to take a step back and kind of reflect and be self-aware when your mind is constantly going. And so like, as you know, as the years were going on, I found myself in that place, like just super anxious, like mind could not shut off. And I found this app called Headspace, and Headspace is a meditation app. They have like a 30-day free trial. And it's this like kind of guided meditation where they walk you through like what meditation is and like what you're supposed to do. And I found it surprisingly effective at being able to help me be more energized, because it was like, you know, you'll do it for like 10 to 15 minutes in the morning when you wake up. And it like has this like calming effect on you throughout the whole day. And it's kind of, you know, it's crazy to think about like 10 to 15 minutes, like such a short time window, having such a big impact on your day. There's a book called 10% Happier about this guy that is I think he's a news anchor on Dateline or something like that. And he was living in New York City, and he's like, you know, just running like crazy, trying to build his career as a journalist in the news, and like started doing cocaine and all this shit to like stay like super energized, and, you know, like wasn't getting any sleep. And, you know, he had a panic attack on air, live on air on the news, and he thought it was the end of his career. And so he started meditating. And it's like, just as time has progressed, I keep hearing this over and over and over about like business leaders and meditation and how impactful that can be to help you kind of take a step back and kind of just be a little bit more reflective, help you, you know, improve your emotional intelligence and self-awareness.
Yeah, that's really, really good. You've mentioned a couple books here, but if you could only recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be?
That's really tough. So like, I think every book, you know, can solve a problem. And depending on what your problem or challenge is, you know, in life or in business, like there's a book probably out there to help you.
And this
you know,
is besides this book.
Yeah. You know, I mean, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, that's obviously an amazing one. You know, I was telling you earlier, Tony Robbins wrote the book, Awaken the Giant Within. I love that book because it helps you kind of embrace the journey you go through of challenges and falling on your face and trying to remind you of like, this is just a small glimpse of your whole life. And don't get caught up and feel like it's going to be your entire journey for the next 60 years. So Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, Awaken the Giant Within.
Yeah.
The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Gary Keller's book, The One Thing. Like, I think that's great. I mean, ultimately what all these books allude to is like your mindset and embracing the journey, being patient, knocking down one domino at a time. And if you're a hard charger, results-oriented type person, like that's very hard to do naturally.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't come to you naturally. And so reading those books like really help you like try to be more mindful of it as you're going through that process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before I get to the last question, what's the business look like today, and what's your role in the business?
So our Austin team did just under 140 million in gross sales, 507 transactions. Gross GCI was just a hair under 4.7 million. Our average sales price was just a hair over 250,000. And we also have 2 expansion offices, one in San Antonio that's a year old. That team will do, so last year they finished in their first year at I think it was 87 transactions last year in 2017. This year they're on track to double that. They should do between 150 and 160 based off current trajectory. Our team in Amarillo is 2 years old. That team last year did just over 160 deals. This year they're probably on track to do 240. They're having a hard time recruiting people. Otherwise, I think it would go to 300. And then, so I franchised the company. So there's a lot of this talk about Keller Williams and the expansion systems and, how you can expand. And so I started so 2013, I stopped being a listing agent, focused on the business more for a year, and then started thinking about how do I expand this. So that at the end of 2014, 2015 is when I started the Amarillo office. And so the team model from an expansion perspective is very expensive to go in other cities. There's a guy named Mark Spain, right? He's in Atlanta. He's the number one producing guy with the team model. It's a large brokerage, but it's a team model. And so he's one of the few guys I know that I think is doing it right. So he's moving into nearby towns that are really close in proximity. And he's just kind of slowly oozing out to be able to leverage his core. That way he can leverage transaction management, marketing, inside sales. I think that's a smart way to go about it. If you want to expand, do it to where you're going to really close nearby cities. In my case, I tested the expansion in 2 different markets, realized it was super capital intensive and it's a slow growth path. I am continuing to do it, our corporate offices, I guess, if you call them what they are. But we kind of made the decision about a year ago to go down the franchising path. If you look at all the franchising systems out there, Keller Williams, Century 21, Better Homes and Garden, et cetera, you're buying a model and a system to teach you how to, go and recruit hundreds of agents. There really wasn't a franchise brand that represented the team model. And so that is our goal, is to build a brand that represents a team model and to work with coaches like you and other people in the coaching industry and really help people focus on the team model. The beauty of the team, as you well know, is when you have a team of basically deals that are the agents are full-time, they're committed, they become market expertise. They develop market expertise. And, the consumer experience that gets created is very consistent. And so I remember at Keller Williams, after I stopped mowing lawns and joined KW, I would talk to people and one person would say great things about them. And then somebody else would say, I didn't have that great of an experience. Well, the most successful brands like Starbucks, when you go to a Starbucks, every single Starbucks is going to have experience. So we wanted to develop a brand around the consumer experience, making it really consistent. And we know that the future of that is with the team model and getting teams partnered up with coaches just like you to be able to help deliver on that, make the agents market experts, help them, just do an amazing job for the customer.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Last question, Chris. If you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Man, if I had to do it all over again, I would go back and tell myself to be more humble. I'd go punch myself in the face. That's what I do. And tell myself to have some more humility. If I could have done it all over again, I would have had a coach pretty much 24/7. I'd go through these periods where I'd have a coach for a year and I'd learn everything. I'd implement it, have a lot of success. And then a year or 2 would go by. I didn't have a coach. And I felt the coach kind of helps you stay humble. It keeps you in check. So if I could go back in time, I would have had a coach year round, and not have had these periods of time where I didn't have one.
Yeah. Man, that's it. That's all I've got for you. I appreciate your time. I do recommend everyone go pick up, if you're listening to this on the podcast, the $1 Million Real Estate Team, How I Went from Zero to Earning $1 Million After Expenses in 3 years. Chris Waters and Bradley Pounds. You got, it looks like that. I love the cover. Super simple and elegant. And it's a good book. I was telling Chris before we jumped on live that I honestly started listening to an Audible, not thinking it was going to be good, just because a lot of the quote unquote books in our industry are like as seen on TV and, you know, these sort of these books, and it comes out of the gate. I mean, I really commend you for being honest and open and transparent in the book. And you basically tell people in the first page, turn around. Like, these are the 5 reasons why you shouldn't read this book. And that's not the way we're sold to these days, you know? So I know I appreciate your openness and honesty. And like I said, the thing I'm bringing to bear on the podcast here is just the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, the fact that you're selling hundreds of homes across 3 locations, and you started with maybe not as much humility, but the vision of building Waters International when, you know, you had no business to call yourself Waters International, right? Then, you know, Robbins International when he was in 200 square feet in Venice Beach or whatever. So I just appreciate your boldness and your sharing with us, and the listeners appreciate you. And I suggest everyone go out and grab a copy of the book. It is a worthy read, and it's on Audible as well. So thanks, brother. I appreciate you.
Hey, Lars, thanks for having me on, man. Keep doing what you're doing. I know you're making a lot of people very successful, and you know, everybody I know that's been through your coaching has just said, I mean, they're raving fans. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing, man. You're helping the industry immensely.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, brother. We'll talk to you soon.